the Diocese of Dodge City, Kansas. The story of the faith in this region began with the labors of zealous missionaries, was sustained by Catholic missionaries from Europe and Mexico, and carries on today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop John Balthazar Brungardt.
Who is our neighbor? Everyone, all of God's children, all brothers and sisters of Christ. So I think compassion is a key virtue for us in our society today.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. In the heart of the Great Plains, in the southwest corner of the state of Kansas, is Dodge City, sea city of the Diocese of Dodge City.
Here in the Catholic Diocese of Dodge City, it's farming and ranching in a big way. I remember going from Dodge City, one of my first weekends, to Scott City, and just driving and seeing the wide open plains. And I thought, thank you, Pope Benedict, thank you, Lord, I'm right at home. So the good farm ranching people, the small towns. Our biggest town is 30,000 people, Dodge City, and we're neck and neck with Garden City, 30,000. We don't have any cities. We don't have a interstate highway going through us. So just the down to earth folks, it's just been a great blessing and just a rich history of the Southwest.
Situated in probably the greatest wheat-producing area of the world, Dodge City has been called the belt buckle of Kansas. But predating this were Native American communities who lived in the area. The Spanish conquistador Coronado explored the area in 1541, entering Kansas from the southern part of what is now the state. Just a few miles outside of present-day Dodge City is what stands the Coronado Cross. It is about 38 feet tall and marks the site of the very first Catholic Mass that was celebrated here in the area. Celebrating that Mass was a Franciscan father, Juan de Padilla, who had accompanied Coronado and his expedition on this exploration journey. Father Juan de Padilla was from Spain originally and was actually a soldier before he becomes a Franciscan friar and begins serving as a missionary. He was seen as a very kind and gentle soul, but also served in many ways as a wonderful moral barometer amongst the men in Coronado's group, calling out what he saw as morally objectionable behavior in the community. And he was always very careful to make sure that the Native Americans that they encountered were treated with respect as well.
De Padilla and 3 other Franciscans originally accompanied Coronado on his quest for the 7 cities of gold. This was a kind of mythical land of great wealth which the Spanish hoped to find in what became the American Southwest. Their search for riches eventually brings them in what is today Kansas. But when no gold was found, Coronado abandoned his search. In 1542, Juan de Padilla returns to Kansas in order to preach to the Wichita people and establish a mission. Sadly, he's killed by the Native Americans, and today he's considered one of the first Christian martyrs in the United States. His cause for canonization is currently open in Rome.
The first Europeans in Dodge City were Spanish, followed by the French. But it was not until the 19th century when immigrants from Europe and the eastern part of the United States moved to the area, that Dodge City began to become a population center.
The Catholic population of the region grew during the homesteading era, when Catholic immigrant groups were enticed to come to Kansas because of the generous U.S. government land grants. And as a result, the Catholic Church's attention shifted from work among Native peoples to ministering to the growing European immigrant population.
Dodge City was founded in 1872 and really becomes known as almost the Babylon of the Midwest. Yet this reputation was something that the citizenry was very, very proud of and continued to promote. In the midst of all this, we find this Benedictine priest, Father Boniface Verheyen, who is an extraordinary individual in the many different talents that he has. He is a professor, he is a geologist, a botanist. At one point, he serves as a college chaplain, the prior of the abbey, but what he was doing in Dodge City was actually volunteering as a chaplain for the military forces that were there. He's known for having translated the Rule of Saint Benedict, a rule for monastic living in a very quiet, measured, prayerful way of living. It goes into 13 printings, but I find it so interesting that he's known for this as well as known for having perhaps trying to create order and rule in the chaos of Dodge City.
In 1913, Bishop Hennessy of Wichita invited the Sisters of St. Joseph to the diocese to establish a school, which later grew into Our Lady of the Plains. Their academy later grew into St. Mary's of the Plains College, one of the few institutions of higher education in the region. Mexican Americans have a long-established presence in the diocese, dating back to the early 20th century when they were recruited to work on the railroads. Confronted by poverty and discrimination, many settled on the outskirts of town, in a region that came to be known as the Mexican Village. In the 1910s, Bishop Hennessy established a chapel named for Our Lady of Guadalupe, which soon became the center of faith life for the Mexican community. Father Gilbert Herman, the pastor of Our Lady of Guadalupe, became an important advocate for the community, including doing things like speaking with restaurant owners who refused to serve Mexican Americans. He was such a beloved figure that members of the parish petitioned the bishop to stop his transfer to another parish.
In 1951, Pope Pius XII creates the Diocese of Dodge City and names Father John Franz the first bishop of the new diocese. Father Franz was originally from Springfield, Illinois, and one of the things when interviewed said that he was brought up in a family that always put faith first. As a result of the teachings of his parents, he said, "It was never any doubt in my mind that I was not going to be a priest."
In recent decades, the work of the diocese has been supported by the Anne and Virgil Decant Foundation, especially to support work of education and adult faith formation. The foundation began in 1985 through a $700,000 gift from Celestine Axman. The name of the foundation honors Virgil Decant, a native of the diocese who served as the Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus from 1977 to 2000.
More recently, we've had a large immigrant population, mainly from Mexico, from Guatemala and other countries. And more recently than that, we have a lot of refugees coming to work in the meatpacking plants, the hospital systems, and so on. So a lot of diversity. People wouldn't guess that in the southwest Kansas, but a lot of diversity in culture. For example, here at the Cathedral, we have 4 masses, 2 Saturday evening, 2 Sunday, and 2 in English, 2 in Spanish. And the Spanish noon Mass on Sunday is full, if you can imagine, full, this place. So a lot of Spanish-speaking immigrants that we're reaching out to. Very culturally diverse, very culturally rich diocese, but a wonderful place. If you want to get away from the rat race in the big city, come out to Dodge City Diocese.
At its founding, the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart was the mother church for the diocese. Accommodating enough people in the church for larger liturgical celebrations, however, became a concern by the end of the 20th century. And as a result, Bishop Ronald Gilmore merged the Church of the Sacred Heart and Our Lady of Guadalupe parishes. A new cathedral was built on December 9th, 2001, the Cathedral of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Our Lady of Guadalupe Cathedral is, in one word, magnificent, magnificent. It's the word I always use to describe it. I joke, we in Southwest Kansas don't like trees and mountains to get in the way of our scenery. Well, this was designed that way, wide open, wide open. No pillars in the way because we don't have any pillars to get in the way of our scenery outside. See the 4 square cupola representing the 4 winds, north, south, east, west. And if you spend any time in Southwest Kansas, very, very windy. And the shape is an octagon, which is reminiscent of the 8th day of the resurrection, or the octave of Easter, the octave of Christmas. And you notice there's 12 pillars representing the 12 apostles. So just a magnificent design, just extraordinary.
The open plan accommodates the growing flock in the diocese. And the attention is centered by the octagonal tester, which hangs above the altar and really centers attention to the action of the Mass, the action of the sacrifice of the Mass below. The central meditation of Our Lady of Guadalupe is Paschal. This is an Easter church. So the octagonal shape of the building, as well as the tester above the altar inside, recall the 7 days of creation and the 8th day, which is resurrection. Elemental motifs of water, because of baptism, are very common in ecclesiastical architecture. At Our Lady of Guadalupe, the image of fire, which is the genesis of the Paschal procession at Easter, is really prominent. And so we have that elemental organization in the approach to the church. It also reminds us of God speaking to Moses in the burning bush.
The cathedra represents the bishop, which represents a successor to the apostles, which represents Christ. We say it's just a chair, but symbolically, it's much, much more than a place to sit. And ours is so amazing. It's made of Cuban mahogany and a hardwood from Mexico, and it's handcrafted, so it's one of a kind, one of a kind. It's amazing, the vista. And I look at the people. It takes a while to look at them because you got to go almost 360. It's not quite 360. So I just in awe every time I preside. The people, the people, the people, my people, our people, the people of God, brothers and sisters in Christ, sons and daughters of the Father.
The cathedra or chair inside the Cathedral of Our Lady of Guadalupe represents Bishop Brungardt's authority as the Apostle of Dodge City.
I was born in Salina, Kansas, in the Salina Diocese, and we moved to Manhattan, Kansas, home of the K-State Wildcats, and later on I got a degree from K-State. I grew up in a very close family, have 5 brothers and sisters, and Mom and Dad, a very strong Catholic faith. So I remember Seven Dolors Catholic Church, where I was baptized and received First Confession, First Communion. Really, my formative years, faith was just a strong part of our life. Thank goodness for Mom and Dad. Francis and Virginia Brungardt, God rest her soul. They died young. Mom was only 59 years old and Dad was only 66 years old. So they weren't present physically for my diaconate or priesthood or Episcopal ordination. Religious sister told me, oh, they had the best seat in the house. So that was a beautiful memory. I went to college at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas, in the Kansas City Archdiocese, and got a degree in physics with a minor in mathematics. So then I went to Iowa State University for a Master of Science in Physics. After Iowa State, moved back to Atchison, where my family was, and started a computer store, believe it or not, of the new microcomputers. Back in the early 80s, that was the brand new thing. Then moved to Wichita to teach physics. In my early days, I was all caught up in physics as a study of God's creation, of the universe, energy, matter, the interrelationships. But fundamentally, physics searches for truth in the physical world, whether it be a truth of a star or truth of nuclear fission, how a pencil drops when you let go of it. Those are all seeking the truth, and we want to try to understand it and describe it. But that was only a stepping stone, and that next stepping stone was realizing I needed to draw more into my Catholic life. So I went from teaching in a private school in Wichita to a Catholic school in Wichita. I moved to Cape and Mount Carmel Catholic High School. I could start the physics class with a prayer. I would have a Bible verse on the wall, and that was just a whole opening up of my deep love of God's physical creation with my deep love of Him. Two years later, I entered the seminary. I had my old truth was the physical world of energy and matter, and my new truth is God Himself, the way, the truth, and the life is Jesus, and truth cannot contradict truth. So it's perfectly natural that a former physicist would be a Catholic bishop. No contradiction whatsoever.
John Brungardt completed his seminary formation at the Pontifical College Josephinum, Columbus, Ohio. And in May of 1998, he was ordained to the priesthood.
So for the summer, Bishop sent me to a parish that was in between priests. So here I am, newly ordained, the administrator of a parish. Talk about deer in the headlights. Because normally you're associate pastor will, but here I am. So I get there, and the first week I get a phone call, someone needed a baptismal certificate. I didn't know how to do such a thing. So I pull out the old manual typewriter and I go click, 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 click. But it was valuable experience because right then and there, I had to be a pastor.
After years of ministry as a priest of the Diocese of Wichita, Kansas, where he worked as a pastor, religion teacher, director of the Diocesan Respect Life and Social Justice Office, moderator of the Diocesan Hispanic Ministry Office, and chancellor of the diocese, in 2011, John Brungardt was installed as the Bishop of Dodge City.
I was driving, and my secretary called and said, this Archbishop in Washington, D.C. is trying to get a hold of you. And I thought, what? So I pulled over and called him back, and Archbishop Sambi, of course Italian, thick Italian accent, you know, is this Father John Brungardt? I said, yes. Then he started saying, as they were walking along the shores of Galilee, in this thick Italian accent, he was telling this long story from the gospel. He went on and on about the call of the apostles, and then it hit me. So he paused for a breath and said, Pope Benedict has appointed you a bishop of Catholic Diocese of Dodge City. Then he went on with his scripture, and just stunned. And then I asked my brother bishops, what did he not take a breath for? And they say, that's so you can't say no. And then 3 months later, February 2nd, 2011, I was ordained a bishop right here at this cathedral. There was just a huge snowstorm, my ordination right here. It was 0 degrees, and the church was full. very tough people here in the Catholic Diocese of Dodge City.
As bishop, Bishop Brungardt has strived to live out his apostolic mission as the chief governor, sanctifier, and teacher of his diocese through the lens of compassion.
In the seminary, one of our exercises was to find the Lord's personal vocation for us. We all thought we were called to the priesthood, but what about you personally? So I discerned through a long process the word compassion. Psalm 103, I picked, "The Lord surround us with love and compassion." So that became my Episcopal motto, filled with compassion, from the prodigal son story. And I had it on my Episcopal ring. Compassion is a key virtue that we all need to live in a more profound way with the Lord's help. The compassion, the word itself means to suffer with, to suffer with. So as you mentioned, we suffer with one another in our temptation and our sinfulness. We suffer with one another when our loved one is ill or in an accident. We suffer with one another when there's poverty and not enough food to eat or shelter or health care. And we suffer with one another when we're divided. We can use the example of politics today, just so divided. We're suffering with one another. So how do we counteract that suffering? With that compassion. And that helps us get out of ourselves and look how we can live in a Christ-like manner to help our neighbor. So I think compassion is a key virtue for us in our society today.